Marisa Franco. She's a Phoenix-based organizer, writer, strategist, and a mother, and co-founder and executive director of Mijente.
Woo! All right, joining them is Dr. Safiya Noble. Woo! Dr. Safiya Noble is the David O. Sears Presidential Endowed Chair of Social Sciences and professor at the University of California, Los Angeles. She is the director of the Center on Resilience and Digital Justice and co-director of the Mindaru Initiative on Tech and Power at UCLA. Professor Noble is the author of the best-selling book on algorithmic harm in commercial search engines entitled Algorithms of Oppression, How Search Engines Reinforce Racism, which has been widely reviewed in scholarly and popular publications. In 2021, she was recognized as a MacArthur Foundation Fellow for her groundbreaking work on algorithmic discrimination. And Dr. Noble is a board member of the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, serving those vulnerable to online harassment, and provides expertise to a number of civil and human rights organizations. Give it up. All right. Last but not least, we've got Gil Duran. Gil Duran was born in Tulare, California, the grandson of Mexican immigrant farm workers. He got his first taste of work in the fields, but became interested in journalism after winning the local newspaper's My Mom is the Best contest in the 5th grade. He graduated from DePaul University in 1998 and started his journalism career at the San Jose Mercury News. As the newspaper industry hit turbulence, he pivoted to politics and spent 15 years advising politicians, including Jerry Brown, Dianne Feinstein, and Kamala Harris. In 2018, he returned to journalism as California opinion editor of the Sacramento Bee, and then became editorial page editor of the San Francisco Examiner. Now an independent journalist, he publishes 2 newsletters, The Nerd Reich, focused on extremist tech politics, and Frame Lab, focused on political language. Give it up, and we'll welcome up our panelists now.
Welcome, everybody.
Woo!
All right. Y'all, I mean, I'm imagining that y'all, like me, are probably staying awake at night concerned about these techno-fascists, yeah? And I can't imagine a better team to talk to us today about what we need to know and what we might ought to do about it. So can you make me a promise? Y'all trust me? I didn't even tell you what it was yet. But I appreciate you. I need you to listen to learn, right? Can you do that? And I need you to take the information that you hear and do something with it. This isn't just an intellectually stimulating conversation. We're trying to win in here, right? If you can't convince me, we're definitely not going to be able to do it. So let me try that again. You're trying to win, right? All right. Gil, I want to start with you. You know, we keep throwing around this word techno-fascist, and I'm curious if you think that's actually the right descriptor, the right word. What makes these folks fascists, and which oligarchs would you say fit the description?
Well, I'm writing a book on this subject right now, and so I had to really do a deep dive into the meaning of fascism, because you hear from a lot of people, oh, everybody uses the word fascist, you're the fascist, and there's actually a pretty good history of fascists accusing their opponents of being fascist. It's a, I'm rubber, you're glue sort of tactic. But if you look at the origins of the word fascist, it comes from the Latin fasces, which meant this bundle of sticks with an axe protruding from the side that was used as a totem of power in ancient Rome. And each stick in the bundle represented a certain facet of authority, and the idea was that one stick can be broken, but when all the sticks are bundled together, it's unbreakable. And the axe off the side stood for the power to execute, for capital punishment, for violence. And basically what fascism is, according to Mussolini, is a... Higher? Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'm only a podcaster. I don't really know how to use a mic. So the bundle is a bundle of corporate power with state power is ultimately what makes fascism in the Mussolini sense, who's considered the major innovator, by some the inventor of fascism. And so what we have today is a bundling of technology with authoritarian power, specifically AI, crypto, surveillance, and increasingly defense technology. And it's all in one bundle together under the Trump administration. And so I think in that way, it's clearly fascism. But fascism has some other characteristics as well: the need to purge its enemies, the need to exploit sexual anxiety and gender issues, the need to constantly demonize its enemies while claiming to be the victim of those enemies. There's a whole checklist, a fascist checklist, and these guys they check every box.
That's sounding true to you? All right. Marisa, I want to go to you next. So, you know, none of the parties, and certainly the MAGA faction, are like one single thing. Where do the tech oligarchs fit inside the MAGA coalition? And where do they agree with the other factions? Where do you see them clashing? And what vulnerabilities is that creating that we should be taking full advantage of?
All right. I'm gonna do I feel like I'm nerd adjacent. I'm smart enough to be good friends with nerds. And sometimes I'm a nerd myself. So I'm gonna give you like my kind of like, bar napkin scratch of how I understand this. So there's factions in sort of a coalition, and not in the coalitions that you're probably used to. It's like forces, groups that are organized that have aligned interests that move in a certain way. We need to get to that level, but so I'm talking about the factions of the essentially the pillars of MAGA, right? A political coalition that has coalesced to take power. Then there's the MAGA movement, and so it's hard for me to take those apart. There was something that Naomi Klein said recently in a podcast, and that I was like, okay, there's a book, exciting. I'm very excited about this book, but she talked about the modern far right as a pathology of injured power, and it resonated a lot with me because Mijente is 10 years old, and we were being born as Trump was coming down the escalator, practically. And 2015. When you think of how did you have these forces that have come together, but that's not exactly just how they won. There's a base. That is, to me, the most significant things. And yes, the base is, some people can say there's people defecting, there's but there's a base. And so I think it's really important. 2015, we think back at that time, you had a renewed Black freedom struggle in this country through the movement for Black Lives Matter. You had millions of people taking the streets to call for accountability and transformation of how police engage our communities, specifically Black communities. You had undocumented youth and the immigrant community turning up. You had just had gay marriage pass. It was, preceded, Me Too hadn't come for a few years, but definitely there was, more conversation about gender identity. It was also the year that millennials outnumbered boomers, but what I found really interesting, the Pew Research Center reported that it was a year that the middle class in the United States was no longer the majority. And so, there was a recently, I think sometimes we talk about why people going to the right, blah, 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 blah. I think there was something I heard recently, and since I feel like it's better in Spanish, that people are fundamentally asking, ¿Quién me robó mi futuro? Who stole my future? And the thing that Donald Trump, you can say whatever you want, but he is a fantastic marketer, messenger, and damn, he's a con man. But you know what? He was saying some things that had elements of truth that people were like, someone's explaining to me, and someone's as pissed as me, and he might not do it, but damn, this status quo shit, I'm done. And so there's a lot more to talk about that. But then you have these different forces. So first you start off with the traditional GOP, the good old country club. The party was broken. They came in, they took over the party. So there's the traditional GOP, but then you have, and so some of these forces are the traditional forces of the Republican Party. but the deck's been reshuffled and there's new players. So you have the sort of infrastructure of the party, then you have the evangelical movement and the infrastructure, and they saw this person is willing to advance our interests, so we're gonna look away on some of the things that don't necessarily align. Then you have, I used to just kind of consider it like the KKK wing, you know? But now you have this much more developed, the white supremacist, white nationalist populism. And then come the tech barons, which I think it's really always important to understand the role of Peter Thiel. So, you know, there was a period where, like, you know, tech was like new power. Many of us adopted tools created by some of these people. Some people might still use them. I don't know. But then you have the tech. And so they came into this, and I think there is, whether it's just the naked pursuit of one's interest, regardless if you have to meet your goal, you're kind of turning away from who you are, which I would say, like, in some cases, evangelicals, but just really like a basic, I think with tech, I think part of it is what's gonna help our bottom line, and despite all of the superfluous language and all this way that they painted themselves and people painted them, there is an element, they're trying to make money. They are the modern day barons of our time. When you think of railroad, oil, all of it, that's who they are. They're a new version of it. But then there's another side that is more cynical that I think is, you know, quitters. They're quitting on our time, they're quitting on our planet, they're quitting on people. And there's this idea that the way but if you understand, I think all these different groups and even us are saying, what we have isn't working. It's not working. So in some ways, they're kind of like, this is not working. They've just made a particular call about where we go from here. And so that's, I think, how they fit into the Trump MAGA coalition.
Yeah, they're shooting a shot. Dr. Noble, I mean,
Safiya.
So,
Please.
I mean, can we give it up one time for the royalty on this stage? Yeah, correct. Correct. You know, as a Black person, your work has been so critical at proving the point that Black people have always been dehumanized by technology. And, you know, from research results to AI-generated images, you've been ringing the alarm. So we know that this is what they're building their business model on, yeah? So why is that kind of othering central to their strategy? Like, why is that central to the current manifestation of fascism that's vying for state power that we're seeing take hold right now?
Well, first, I just want to say it is such an honor to be here on this panel and be in this room with all of you, and for us to keep grappling with these questions, because they are there are long antecedents to this moment that we're living in. I think that one of the things that we need to kind of grapple with about the tech is that it is a fundamental project of the state. And I'm not sure that I think that people have a lot of different experiences. We have our own lived experiences with the technologies that we use, but the project of the classification of human beings, the standardization of systems that enable things like Palantir and Google and all of the social media and all of the things, AI, if you will. These have always been, I think at their heart, they've been eugenicist projects. Obviously, we've got this fantastic new documentary out, Ghost in the Machine, that really helps people understand the eugenicist origin story of AI, for example, and that's very important. So that is a project of Black annihilation, most certainly, a way of thinking about bringing these fascist, apartheidist, Jim Crowist, you know, we could name many different eras and different places around the world where these projects have been projects of the state. Even Google, you know, I'm not even sure that people understand that companies like Google, Facebook, these were seed funded by InQtel, which is the VC of the CIA. So, the Homeland Security advisors were the advisors to the people who founded these companies, especially coming out of places like Stanford and the Valley. So I think it's important that we conceptualize, and this has been very hard work to do because there have been these kind of, I think, popular ways of thinking about technology as facilitating movements, facilitating communication, but that is also within the dragnet of law enforcement and the state that we have done that work. And so that's one of the fundamental contradictions about what it means to do our work inside or with or under the gaze of the surveillance state. I think now we are also in an accelerated experience of companies like Palantir, Oracle, consolidating their power inside of governments and then acting as the government, quite frankly. So this is a challenge. I mean, we've seen that again, there were flashpoints, DeepMind taking over the UK health records, Doge, if you will. I can barely say that with a straight face because it's not legitimate. But the fact that we have a desire by the state, many states around the world, but certainly right-wing authoritarian regimes, to know everything that can be known about members of the state or people who reside within the state for control. I mean, the blueprint for that is from the United States. And that's one of the things that, we live in this kind of xenophobic, propagandistic culture around countries like China and worries about things like social credit. But I will tell you that the surveillance state in the United States goes back, and this is people like Simone Brown, right, writing about dark matters. It goes back to the lantern laws, where Black people, we had to carry lanterns in order to move from plantation to plantation, and or we would be murdered. And so every bit of our experience in this country has been fundamental to understanding who is tracked, who is controlled, whose labor is extracted from, the actuarial science, the insurance industries. I mean, all of these things are about the control of the movement of Black and brown bodies. And I think if we frame it that way, also including the internet, I mean, I've been trying to write this alternate history, like a people's history of the internet kind of a book that may never come out. So I'll just tell you right now what it's about because this is it.
Spoiler alert,
This
friend.
is it right
Spoiler
here.
alert. Spoiler alert.
But the internet and the as a DARPA project, as a Department of Defense project, it's narrated one way, but the way we might narrate that is that this was about trying to keep scientific information, military information away from the non-aligned movement, away from third world liberation movements, away from the anti-colonial movements. And it was about being able to trace how scientific movement research was moving. Because, in the old days, scientists would or academics would just write a paper, you'd maybe type it up, and then put it in an envelope and mail it to all your colleagues who were also working in that area. But, the internet allowed scientists and the military in particular to share things electronically, but also track it and know if those things were going to, let's say, enemies of the state of the United States. So if the project is fundamentally a surveillance network that is about controlling knowledge that would move or science that would move to liberation of people of color, well, that's actually the story. And we are living in the many, many manifestations of that now.
Learn something? Yeah. Also take a breath. It's heavy.
Oh, we need a drink after this
Yeah.
panel. I'm already.
First
clear about
round's on
that.
y'all. First round's on y'all. Gil, what are the techno-fascists actually building right now? And where do the people in this room fit into that vision of the future that they're developing?
Well, that's a pretty dark subject.
Sorry, y'all.
They're
The first step is admitting you have a
Yeah.
problem.
very big problem. They're building the future in their mind, and it's one they've envisioned for a long time. I don't think they have a full idea of where it goes. I don't think they have it all figured out. And I think as we see now with this administration faltering, with it seeming like we might have midterm elections after all, they must be a little worried right now. The most hopeful thing I've seen all year is that Palantir is now hiring up Democratic lobbyists, which means that Democrats are going to matter again, is the signal I take from that. We'll see. But I think the easiest way for me to explain it is the way that Peter Thiel understands it. And back in 1997, there was a book that got published called The Sovereign Individual. And it was a book by these two creepy conspiracy theorist guys who went on to help found Newsmax. And the thesis of The Sovereign Individual was that in the 21st century, technology was going to change everything. And that the nation state was going to collapse into chaos and violence, and that a special group of people known as the cognitive elites would be savvy enough to escape from this collapsing democratic world and live sort of through jurisdictional arbitrage or by traveling around through different places where their money mattered more than anything. And this would be the future, a post-democracy, post-nation-state world. And the two technologies, according to The Sovereign Individual, that were going to make this possible were one called cyber currency, which we now know as crypto, and the other one would be advanced automation, which was basically AI, not needing workers anymore. And this book had made such a deep impression on Thiel that he went and tried to start a company that would create a kind of digital currency. And it eventually became known as PayPal once he merged it with another guy he met across the hall named Elon Musk. And so the future, according to Thiel, is this collapse of the nation state into this violent chaos. According to The Sovereign Individual, there's going to be a massive and possibly violent backlash against technology, which is why these guys need to escape into different places and get the hell out of here before it all goes down. And so what they imagine is a future without jobs, which is a future without power for the majority of people on Earth. And of course, once you have money, you want power. Once you have power, you want money. And once you have both, you want to live forever and be God. And that's the stage we're at now with these billionaires. They are saying, some of them are saying they're going to live forever. Some of them are going to say they're saying they'll become multiplanetary. They're going to merge with AI and become godlike. And so that is the extent that we know about the future they're planning. And it does not involve the majority of people on Earth. So.
Destroy everything and be God?
Well, at the farthest reaches of this fantasy, they become these sort of robot, super intelligent machines that travel from galaxy to galaxy, harvesting the energy of other stars until I don't know what they're going to get to with that or why it would be fun. By the way, it's not even possible. But that's why no matter what you imagine for the future, you should not care what anybody thinks in terms of it being realistic, because the billionaires are not realistic, and we should be unrealistic as well.
Thank you. Marisa, I think I've lost count of the number of rooms that we've been in and consultants say Palantir is an impossible target. Is it just us? And despite that, Mijente has been making impossible things possible for a decade. So y'all have been targeting Palantir since 2017, and the threat has only grown. So tell me about what Palantir's doing right now and what folks should be paying attention to.
Well, first I would say this is a good plug. There's a workshop, I think today, from Purge Palantir Coalition. They will be much more detailed than I would be here. So if you really want to get down and dirty about Palantir, what they're doing and what folks are doing to stop them, I highly recommend that workshop. But yeah, they have huge contracts with ICE and the Department of Defense. And they're basically like, imagine all the data these people are collecting. And I would, I've sometimes been like, what the hell do they do with all this stuff? So Palantir's proposing, they're the solution to that, where they are data analysts and they're creating software products that allow them to get more and more and more precise. There was at one point years ago that I would be like, it's like Facebook, but for cops. Create profiles on everybody. And it's like, oh, now I get it. So, I think that's the gist. I mean, they are behind, and it's not, so we've been, we've sounded the alarm on Palantir and others like them around how they engage in immigration enforcement and the criminalization of migrants, but obviously they are involved in war. This is a global company. And so, they posit themselves as, this seamless, magical solution, clean, precise, to really complex problems. They see themselves as a quasi-intelligence partner, and they see themselves as like, we're fighting for the good guys. They were kind of in a time when, Silicon Valley was a little more counterculture, definitely more seen as with the Democrats. They were the very patriotic. They were much more like gung-ho Americana. And I think, this is something on the immigration front. They used to say this really bad joke, is that, it'd say, hey man, like they say they're only gonna go after the criminals. It's good news, but the bad news, we're all criminals. And so with, these companies like Palantir, it's like they can say they're only, their cause is just, they have, particular thresholds and this and that. But at the end of the day, who's the good guy? Who's other? I think many folks in our communities know that we have real experience with being in that category, and we see in this time how quickly and how malleable that is, how much it shifts based off of their interests and to justify their fuckery. And so yeah, they are a difficult target. Like they're like it's like boycotts. I think boycotts sometimes. I kind of think corporate campaigns, sometimes I think about it like boycotts, which is a tactic of it. But like, to me, I used to be like, boycotts kind of be like diets. So if we really wanted to, like, if I'm trying to figure out my little situation, there's certain things I know that I could do, but I don't want to do. I wanted something. So what's something you're going to follow? You have to see impact, and it has to be easy to do, right? So it's like boycotts. You got to do something that you see impact and it's easy to do. So Palantir's kind of like, what? Nobody knows who they are. But for us, it felt important because the assessment was this company was going to grow in prominence, and it was important for people to know who they are. And I think we're seeing now that that moment has come. I mean, they've been playing a very significant role, but it's much more in our face. I'll just close. There's a quote that really stood out to me, and it really thought, like, there's two quotes I want to share. This is one from Alex Karp on a, ¿cómo se dice? The shareholder call. Palantir is here to disrupt and make the institutions we partner with the very best in the world. And when it's necessary to scare enemies and on occasion, and when it's necessary to scare enemies and on occasion to kill them. So quasi-intelligence partner, and so my last quote is from someone named Benito, and it's not Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio. It is Benito Mussolini. The definition of fascism is the marriage of corporation and state.
Yeah. Gil, I want to toss it to you next. So you've got a book called The Antichrist.
The Nerd Reich, Silicon Valley Fascism and the War on Democracy.
So
the last chapter is called The Antichrist.
The last chapter is called The Antichrist, and it's about Peter Thiel.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. So he's been given lectures on the Antichrist, and tell me what that's about. Like, what is he trying to do?
TLDR, Peter Thiel believes the United States of America is the Antichrist because it promotes democracy all over the world, theoretically. We might have some quibbles about that, but in his mind, that's the problem with the United States. Now, he has a lot of different targets. He gives these lectures on the Antichrist. It's 4 hours on 4 different days. Nothing weird about that. as part of his Antichrist lecture, he goes on and on for a section about the mystical importance of the number 33. I don't know if you're familiar with certain types of mental issues, but once they get deep into numerology, it's bad, you know? And, but Peter Thiel has been obsessed with the Antichrist for quite a while. If you look back in his history, it starts like 2007, 2008, actually goes back to 1996. And what he did is he took this lecture from an Austrian academic that he heard in 96. He stole it and he flipped it in reverse and did the opposite of what this theologian said. This theologian was critiquing how the Nazi philosopher Carl Schmitt had described the Antichrist. What Thiel is doing is promoting this Nazi philosopher's view of the Antichrist. And we see this a lot with Thiel. He takes an idea and he reverses its meaning. Palantir, right? This all-seeing stone wielded by an evil wizard in the Lord of the Rings. Well, that's the tool for the good that we're going to use. And we're the hobbits, right? When actually you're not. So everything Thiel does is sort of the reverse, sort of like the Antichrist would do. You know, everything is upside down, everything is back. I'm surprised he's still speaking forward instead of backward. We'll get to that point. But the most important thing to understand is that he is calling for corporate leaders and the right wing to view our politics as an existential battle between good and evil. And evil is democracy, evil is the majority of people having a say in things, and good is a definition of freedom where the wealthy and the white and the male have supremacy forever, which is a familiar concept we have. People have mentioned eugenics. It's impossible to separate any of this from eugenics. And I'll say that Peter Thiel, for many years and still today, was described by some as a libertarian, meaning that what does a libertarian want? Limited government, etc. But how can you be a government surveillance contractor and want limited government? It doesn't make sense. But as we know, most of the media is very dumb about politics, and I'm a journalist, so I know that better than anybody. So they don't really explain what's happening. But it's impossible to separate libertarianism from eugenics because it's the viewpoint that one singular individual doesn't need everybody else in order to survive. And so if you look at things that way, you automatically have a supremacist viewpoint. And I think it's time that we redefine what libertarian means. Whenever anybody says libertarian, you know, you got to go the other way. It's totally a right-wing viewpoint.
Seeing some snaps, hearing some amens. Feeling a little gaslit by Peter Thiel today? Anyone? Safiya. So tech corporations have captured academia by funding, right? And not just them, like other factions in the MAGA coalition, but certainly them too. They're funding research, they're embedding in labs, they're recruiting the scholars who are supposed to hold them accountable to their evil mission, right? So your work at UCLA is a direct challenge to that, and I'm sure they're pretty pissed. Why is the university worth fighting for? And what does that fight actually look like from your vantage point?
Well, I think we all can relate to coming from people and histories and ancestors who were murdered for learning how to read or write or have knowledge. So for me, I'm just fundamentally never going to give up on education and the spaces that allow for that and allow for our free thinking. It's really important. And in the United States, we have a variety of public institutions, public universities, public schools, and these have been a major pathway for most of us to have access to education. And they're very important to me as part of the project of democracy, even though democracy has many shortcomings and has failed us in many ways too. It doesn't mean that, to me, we just surrender these spaces to our dark overlords. And the universities have been so profoundly defunded over the past 50 years, but certainly the last 25 that has been aggressive, the kind of neoliberal social and economic policy. And a lot of that has to do also with that corporations don't pay taxes for the most part. And so they have massively defunded the public interest. And that is incredibly dangerous for all of us. That leaves us more precarious. And so I think the university, for me, it's the lane that I picked where I felt that I could maybe make a contribution. And it is very important that there be space for us to do research that then can work with movement organizations and communities and journalists. And there's a symbiotic relationship, I think, between scholars and movement organizers. So to me, that's been very important for us at UCLA for the work that I do. UCLA has also uniquely been a university that has a huge $1.2 billion target on its back by the Trump administration, because it was one of many flashpoint universities around the encampments and the solidarities with Gaza and the people of Palestine. And it was also a place where, I'm not sure that people know, but there are kind of, more Israelis in Los Angeles than kind of outside of the state of Israel. So, that is a place where there's a lot of acute tension over Palestine, and UCLA became a campus that was a flashpoint for that work. And so we are facing a $1.2 billion fine, whatever, from the administration. And I think, what that does, though, in terms of making universities vulnerable, is that the tech industry has, yes, it has captured, because, where in California, the University of California and the California State University and our community colleges, they were funded by the public, by taxpayers, 80%. 20 years ago, and now it's like less than 10%. And so where does the university have to go? Well, it's vulnerable to corporate interests and private donors who can come in and pay for this. I mean, I've heard people here in Georgia, one of my colleagues at Georgia Tech, telling me about how Google was like, why don't we just buy Georgia Tech? And Andre Brock is here from Georgia Tech over here, you guys, and he's like, please buy it. So, this means just more of the same BS, okay? I mean, we have to really be mindful of what it means for these institutions, for all public goods, libraries, schools, hospitals, clinics. I mean, every aspect of what we need to be healthy and strong and smart, being available for capture. And, I don't think we're doing all that. I mean, on my way here last night, I learned of a massive budget cut in the area that I work in. And so, I would say that for the scholars who are trying to be aligned with the kind of work that you all are doing, we are tremendously vulnerable inside these institutions. I mean, you all really made it possible even for me to have an academic career, because so many people read my book, and that, it's like everybody was like, well, damn, we better not leave her alone, because I feel like she got people out there. So, but that is important. That relationship between journalists and scholars and organizers is very important. We have to learn from each other and use those resources and the knowledge to protect our people, and also have joy, and also dream up alternative futures than the ones that they dream up, which are ludicrous. I don't even know why they would want to live in the dreams they have. They're very dystopian. I mean, Gil just rolled it out for us. And also, let me just say that we have to understand that they will build craven, depraved systems of power that, that are evidence in things like Epstein Island and Epstein's Ranch. And, listen, there were plenty of academics that helped build those kinds of despicable sites of so-called research. So I don't know. I think that this is important for us to not see ourselves as separate, but to see ourselves in different lanes, trying to again, enact worlds that are beautiful and free.
Yes. I want to live in a world that's beautiful and free. Do you? You want to live in a world that's beautiful and free? Marisa, at Mijente, you've been studying the history of fascism all across the Latin American diaspora. What lessons from that history should this movement be drawing on now?
I'm gonna keep this one short. So everything that I think it's always I'll say in Spanish and I'll translate for myself, that'll help me. Lo que se ve allá, se ve aquí. Nosotros estamos aquí porque ellos estuvieron allá. Yeah? So like, I think for everything, like what I trip out on is like, there's always what's happening in not only Latin America, but across the global South, right? In many ways, the forms of relationship that the United States has, we were recently trying to figure out this statement, and my colleague Rodrigo, just made this point that I was like, damn, I never thought about it that way. He's like, the United States has never allowed for an experiment to fully run its course. They always, siempre se imponen. They always intervene. And I really sat back and I was like, damn. And I think we could all think about our own communities and where we come from, particularly if you come from a community that is traditionally marginalized, has been kind of, something's been built off your back. When something's taking root, they always come in and try to snuff it out. And so that dynamic and understanding that dynamic, and then really how that has impacted in many ways, just catalyzed or, it's impacted the complete history and development of the continent. So the intervention and the imponer, the imposition of power, it has been an authoritarian laboratory. It is a laboratory for things, as again, many of our communities are the same. When you look at examples of, Chile, like a lot of the things have been tried there. But I guess I just kind of want to end with the possibility, or the way to me that it's always been like, it's the place where you get to see, sometimes you see your future in these places that seem very far away. Sometimes you understand history, but I also think I think it just, for me, it's like constantly understood, like as much as they talk about borders, and I was like, are they getting papers to do their space travel? Anyway, damn pilgrims. Like, as much as they talk about, they are very intersectional and they are very transnational. And I think the opportunity for us is to consistently have that practice, because I would tell you, like, in the politics of Latin America are very much the same politics. The Chilean presidential election, the top issues are crime and immigration. Years ago when we went down there, they were grappling with police violence, and they were talking about the citizen review boards. And I was like, yo, we gotta talk. That's like 10 years ago. Let me tell you how that happens. So, tenemos que tener una orientación sin fronteras. And I think when we go to our homelands, we create our homelands, we both understand our history, but we also can see our future, and we can connect to our future. And so I think that's the possibility, and that's the lesson, that we can be border crossers and share and learn and exchange with each other, and that our respective homelands are a place not only to recover memory and to connect to the past, but actually to foresee and touch the future.
Yeah, literal remembering. Gil, I want to start to wrap with this question that I'll also give to you. What opportunities do you see in the midst of this dystopian, antichrist-led movement? What do you see that we could be doing to build more people power for the sake of winning?
Well, I think these guys have given us a big opportunity to accelerate, one of their favorite words, accelerate people toward a more radical understanding of what's possible and what's happening. Because they're going to force this future on us unless we have a better alternative. And it's not going to be easy. I think the worst is yet to come in terms of what's going to happen. This is not going to be an overnight process. It's a long struggle. And so we had to be prepared for that long struggle. And I think that some of the people we've seen here already during this meeting have been working to get more people involved. When it comes to your town in the form of a data center or in the form of a network state project like we're seeing in Honduras or in California, where in Solano County they're trying to build this new billionaire-owned city called California Forever, and it did the most amazing thing in 2024, which is that it united Trump supporters and Democrats against the tech billionaire city. Polls showed that 70% of the people in Solano County were opposed to it. So we have to help people understand that it's all around us already and how it's affecting us and who's doing it. Polls show that a lot of people don't like these tech guys. They're against Peter Thiel. They're against the billionaires. And wait until they find out that Peter Thiel thinks the United States is the Antichrist, right? If we had the budget to tell people about that, people are getting upset in the evangelical community about the perversion of Christianity that's taking place. I mean, last week, Trump posted a meme as Jesus Christ. And,
Doctor, it was a doctor.
You know, yeah, Dr. Jesus.
Dr. Jesus. He's my healer. Don't get me, look, I'll throw a Baptist fit on this stage talking about that.
And I would say that there's no future in which we have both billionaires and democracy. It's one or the other. And the good news is that there's only about 3,000 billionaires in the world, 964 in the United States estimated, and there's 8.5 billion people. So this is the easiest trolley problem ever. And the people should not the people should not be afraid of the billionaires. The billionaires should be afraid of the people.
Yeah, that's where you shout. Safiya, same question.
Well, I actually feel very hopeful about the future because their projects are, well, first of all, we know fascism is really not sustainable because it's stupid, and that's just a fact. And so we have that on our side. But also their projects are completely unsustainable. I mean, you cannot put $300 billion into a company that's going to return $5 billion, which is OpenAI. I mean, it's like days are numbered, okay? You can't pave over the entire world for data centers. Also, not going to happen. So we have a lot of places, I completely agree with Gil, that the public is opposed to this kind of rapid change in the wrong direction. Workers are suspicious of AI and technology. They don't want it. So obviously, we understand the environmental and climate dimensions of their projects and how dangerous they are for the Earth and all of its inhabitants. So our work, to me right now, is about linking up these various kinds of concerns, because over and over again, you know, we see that people who work, let's say, in environmental justice may not understand the things that Gil understands. And so how do they link that up to talk back to billionaires? People who work in civil and human rights, it's bleak the way that they're understanding, and I mean in like traditional politics, electoral politics, the literacy is very low, and they are being captured every single day by the effective altruists and that kind of test grail money that's flowing into DC, flowing into politics, flowing into academia. So we've got to link up what these kind of these worldviews are of these folks. And again, I implore us to stop talking about technology and calling it a tool. We have to name it as a political practice of power. We have to give it nuance. We have to be specific so that when people in politics and people that we are electing are engaging and taking their money, they understand what they're doing. They're enabling and facilitating kind of the decimation of our communities, and we have to kind of name it in very specific ways. So the work that you do kind of on the ground to give texture and narrative and the way we storytell what technology is the way that we will defeat these billionaires and these companies.
Y'all, as we come to close, I want to remind you that that MAGA coalition is fragmented. They don't agree on much of anything, and there's so many more of us than there are of them. I wonder what let's just like have a little story time to close, right? Imagine that in 12 months, a big bad guy destroyed government as you've known it in your lifetime, faster than you've been able to with decades and decades and decades of grants, right? It would create a vacuum, no? And what you just heard is that the techno-fascists have a plan for how to fill that vacuum, right? I imagine because you're at this that you also don't want like some neo-lib U-turn back to like the devil we used to know, right? Am I right? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. And if that's the case, then like the absence of them actually being able to implement a plan that we actually don't want in the first place is also pretty limited, right? But imagine what might become possible if you had a plan. What might happen if you, like the MAGA coalition, actually believe that you could be the status quo? That actually the majority would be down for what you're talking about? And what if we just talked to them like we believed it? Regular ass people, right? So I'm encouraged. I gave you 2 assignments. I asked you to learn something, did you? And I asked you to be open to being transformed in the service of hearing it by being willing to commit to doing something different with this information that you've now learned. Are you down to do that? Then I think our job is done. Can we give it up for this amazing, amazing, amazing panel? You can do better than that. Give it up for these brilliant, brave, courageous humans who made an incredible sacrifice to be here and teach us today. Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Safiya. Thank you, Marisa.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give it up for our panelists one more time.